just very briefly, N3C is actually a unified collection of multiple data models. We harmonize everything into OMOP and then provide analytic capacity for investigators. The application stack is pretty complex. This is actually built upon a commercial package that NCATS had made available to us, which is Palantir's Enclave. You can see a number of different components there. One thing that is in process right now, the dotted stuff on the right-hand side, is that there's a privacy preserving record linkage initiative underway using an honest broker for a variety of things. The genomics thing I will emphasize is viral genomics, not human genomics. So when it's all said and done, we've got a fairly large cohort. We've got 6.8 million people, patients in the system. 2.2 million of those are COVID positive. And then we have a fair retrospective set of data about those individuals. So the meat of this presentation is really about the plumbing, if you will. So the mechanisms that are required to make things happen here is that contributing institutions have to sign a data transfer agreement, a DTA, that goes to NCATS. NCATS deals with the legalities of this stuff. Once those DTAs are signed, then information is pulled into the staging areas, goes through the harmonization process, transformation to OMOP when necessary, and then 3 different versions of data are created: synthetic, which is a fairly open thing with a data use agreement, de-identified, and then a limited data set that's made available. The limited data set does require IRB approval. NCATS plays data steward on this and is basically the owner of that platform. The bottom lozenge then on contributing research activity to it as opposed to just data. Data use agreements are signed off at the institutional level, and then individual data users actually sign data use requests that gain them access to one of the 3 versions of the data. So as you can see here, there's a lot of tracking going on in terms of agreements and so forth. And what that then translates into is a lot of information flow that needs to be coordinated, i.e. the plumbing. So for DTAs, we've got just shy of 90 of those at the moment. NCATS manages them internally. I see them showing up in a G Suite spreadsheet that's actually managed by NCATS. There's a manual matching into RORs. ROR.org provides us unique identifiers for organizations. There's roughly about 100,000 RORs within that space. We actually shadow most of our data resources locally, including the ROR data, to ensure that we can do the clean data linkage that we're seeking to achieve. We automatically harvest those DTAs into our staging area, the labs database environment, using standard G Suite APIs. And then Palantir and the Enclave actually sees this data by polling our environment through a database schema that we provide to them for visibility. And that polling then is actually a pull from their side rather than a push from our side. And this pull-push thing becomes important in terms of the governance constraints that we have available to us. Data use agreements effectively comparable to DTAs. We've got 223 of those. Those are 223 different institutions that have signed on at this point. And then in terms of information flows, we also then, using some custom widgets, embed the DUA roster into Drupal for the website presentation as well. User registrations at a slightly different scale. We have just over 2,600 users at this point. They actually registered by means of a custom application that we've built out. It's actually connected into UNA, which is NCATS authentication mechanism. So institutions can use it in common. For individuals that don't have in common access, they can do login.gov. The NIH people have their own mechanism within this framework. What that does mean is we don't track any passwords, and we don't have to worry about authenticating identity of individuals. That's all done by means of the federated authentication components. We do store their metadata about credentials within the lab environment. And then again, we actually provide access to the enclave by means of identifying the matching RORs for the DUAs, the data use agreements for those individuals. And then that clears that registration up into the enclave for account creation. This is something that NCATS requires us to do. We can't let anybody on without identifying their institutional organizations. The ORCID data that we require gives us authoritative identity for people. And again, we shadow ORCID about every 4 hours incrementally off their AWS instance. So it gives us about 20 million or 12 million ORCID records. Palantir pulls this information about every 7 minutes to try to keep new registrations flowing as we go along. But we then do actually push things back out to G Suite for the admin team to be able to work on. Domain teams are a macro cluster here of individuals with like interests, but then at the project level, these are the actual research teams. So roughly November, we had about 134 of these project requests, but by August now, we're up to 239. So we've picked up 100 different projects within the enclave within just the last 9 months. So domain teams versus projects, again, the push and pull here, we pull these data out of the Drupal instance because that's actually where we're managing the definition of domain teams. And then we push that over into the staging area. Palantir actually pulls that information regularly, and then we push that into G Suites. Project data is actually managed within the enclave, so we actually have to pull that from the enclave on a daily basis and then push that to G Suite for the admin team. And then comparably, we use an equivalent widget to what I was describing earlier to stage the data into Drupal for presentation. Once that's all done, it actually finally gives us the ability to roll this all up into a dashboard. And rather than try to do this live, it's basically covid.cd2h.org/dashboard. The collaborative tab rolls all of this stuff up into a set of tables and a set of graphs that are showing growth of the project over time. The application stack here is basically D3 doing the visualizations, data tables, giving us interactive tables, sitting on top of a standard Tomcat 9 application stack, which sits on top of version 10 Postgres. We also do the same thing with publications. We've got roughly 14,000 medRxiv preprints, 4,000 bioRxiv preprints, and about 158,000 lit COVID metadata records coming out of NLM. We actually then pull the manuscript roster that the publications committee is managing. We go approximate matching against that to provide the publication tab within the dashboard. So basically, in that regard, what we've got is a lot of plumbing to create what seems like a very simple set of dashboard tabs, but ends up being a lot of data to push around. And I think I just managed coming on time.